The clipboard trembled in Karen's manicured hands as she watched the city inspector stride across her neighbor's pristine backyard. She'd called in the complaint herself, anonymous. Of course certain that Sarah's death trap of a pool would finally be condemned. But as the inspector turned around, removing his safety helmet and revealing a face that made Karen's blood run cold, she realized she'd just made the biggest mistake of her perfectly orchestrated suburban life. The inspector's knowing smile cut through the morning air like a blade. Well, well, well. If it isn't my dear Aunt Sarah Martinez, stood at her kitchen window, steam rising from her coffee mug as she watched the early morning joggers pass by Maple Street. 3 months ago, she'd thought herself the luckiest woman. A live new job, new house, new beginning. The colonial-style home with its wraparound porch and mature oak trees had seemed like a dream come true. Even the in-ground pool in the backyard, though it needed some work, had felt like a blessing rather than a burden. Now, as she spotted Karen Whitmore emerging from her immaculate Victorian next door, Sarah's stomach clenched with familiar dread. "Morning, Sarah," Karen's voice carried, across the narrow strip of grass between their properties, sickeningly sweet as artificial sweetener. "Lovely day, isn't it?" Sarah forced a smile and stepped onto her back patio. "Good morning, Karen. Yes, beautiful weather." Karen approached the chain-link fence that separated their yards, her perfectly pressed khakis and polo shirt making Sarah suddenly conscious of her own paint-stained work clothes. "I couldn't help but notice you've been doing some work on that pool of yours. Very ... ambitious." The word ambitious dripped with condescension. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice level, just trying to get it ready for summer. "The kids next door have been asking about swimming lessons." "Oh, the Peterson children." Karen's eyebrows shot up in mock concern. "Well, I certainly hope you're taking all the proper safety precautions. Pools can be so dangerous, especially older ones like yours. Have you had it inspected recently?" Sarah's grip on her coffee mug tightened. This was the third time this week Karen had brought up pool safety, each conversation more pointed than the last. "It's perfectly safe. Karen, I've been working with a pool contractor to bring everything up to code." "Of course, dear. I'm sure you have." Karen's smile never wavered, but her eyes gleamed with something that made Sarah's skin crawl. "Though I have to say, from my kitchen window, some of those repairs look rather ... makeshift. That new decking, for instance. Did you do that yourself?" Heat flooded Sarah's cheeks. She'd spent the last 2 weekends rebuilding the damaged section of deck around the pool, watching YouTube tutorials and reading every guide she could find. The work wasn't pretty, but it was solid and safe. "Yes, I did. And before you ask, I pulled all the proper permits." "I'm sure you did your best," Karen said, her tone suggesting anything but confidence. "It's just that, well, we all have a responsibility to the neighborhood, don't we? Property values and all that. And with children. AROUND." "The pool is safe," Sarah repeated, her voice harder now. "If you have specific concerns, I'd be happy to show you the work I've done." Karen stepped back from the fence, her hands clasped in front of her like a schoolteacher disappointed in a student. "Oh, I wouldn't want to impose. I'm sure you know what you're doing after all. You're the expert here." The dismissal stung more than any direct insult could have. Sarah watched as Karen glided back toward her house, her posture radiating smug satisfaction. "Everything okay out there?" Sarah turned to find her neighbor from across the street, Mike Chen, approaching with his golden retriever, Buddy. Mike was one of the few neighbors who'd actually welcomed her to the street with genuine kindness rather than thinly veiled suspicion. "Just Karen being Karen," Sarah said, attempting a laugh that came out more bitter than she'd intended. Mike's expression darkened. "What's she stirring up now?" "Pool safety." "She keeps implying that my pool is going to kill someone," Sarah gestured toward the backyard where her rebuilt deck and newly installed safety fence were clearly visible. "I've done everything by the book, Mike. More than everything. I've spent every weekend for the past month making sure every single detail is perfect. I know you have. I've watched you work your ass off out there." Mike's voice carried genuine respect. "That woman has been nothing but trouble since she moved in 2 years ago. She's reported half the street for something or other." "What do you mean the Johnson's tree was too tall and blocking her view?" "The Petersons' kids were too noisy, playing in their own backyard." "She tried to get Mrs. Garrett's rose garden declared a public nuisance," because the bees were trespassing into her yard. Mike shook his head in disgust. She's got the city inspector on speed dial, I swear. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. The city inspector? Yeah, some guy named Davidson. He's been out here at least 6 times in the past year, always following up on Karen's complaints. Poor Mrs. Garrett had to spend $800 on new fencing because Karen claimed the roses were encroaching on her property line. Sarah's coffee had gone cold in her hands, and the city always sides with her. Not always, but often enough. Davidson seems to take her seriously anyway. The rest of us figure she's either got something on him, or she's just persistent enough to wear him down. Mike's expression softened. Look, I'm probably just being paranoid, but you might want to double-check everything on that pool. Karen's got that look in her eye, the same one she had before she went after the Petersons. After Mike left, Sarah spent the afternoon going over every inch of her pool area with obsessive attention to detail. The new decking was level and properly secured. The safety fence met all height requirements with self-closing, self-latching gates. The pool equipment was housed in a proper enclosure, and she'd even added extra safety features beyond what the code required. Her phone buzzed with a text from her cousin Danny. How's the new place treating you? Still loving suburban life? Sarah found herself typing and deleting responses. How could she explain that her dream home was turning into a nightmare because of one vindictive neighbor? That she was losing sleep over a woman who seemed determined to find fault with everything she did. Finally, she settled on, it's an adjustment. Some neighbors are friendlier than others. Danny's response came quickly. Want me to come check out the pool situation? I've got some free time this week. Sarah hesitated. Danny worked for the city's building and safety department, but she didn't want to impose on family relationships. Thanks, but I think I've got it handled. Just being extra careful. Suit yourself. But if you need an official eye on things, just holler. I know all the codes, inside and out. That evening, Sarah stood in her backyard as the sun set behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The pool sparkled in the fading light, looking perfect and peaceful. She'd invested so much time, money, and effort into making this space safe and beautiful. It was her sanctuary, her reward for all the hard work of starting over. The sound of Karen's back door opening shattered the tranquil moment. Sarah watched through the gaps in the fence as her neighbor moved around her own pristine patio, watering plants that already looked perfectly maintained. Such a lovely evening, Karen called out, her voice carrying that familiar false sweetness. Perfect for a swim, I'd imagine. It will be, once the weather warms up a bit more, Sarah replied, carefully. Karen's hose continued to spray, the sound sharp and deliberate. I do hope you'll be careful about who you invite over. Insurance can be such a nightmare when there are accidents. The threat was barely veiled. Sarah's hands clenched into fists at her sides. There won't be any accidents, Karen. I've made sure of that. Of course you have, dear. I'm sure you've done everything you think is necessary. Karen's emphasis on think was subtle but unmistakable, though I suppose we'll see what the professionals have to say about it. Sarah's blood went cold. What professionals? But Karen had already turned away, disappearing into her house with a satisfied smile that Sarah caught in the reflection of the patio doors. That night, Sarah lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Karen's words echoing in her mind. We'll see what the professionals have to say about it. It sounded like a promise, or maybe a threat. She thought about calling Danny, asking him to come take a look, just to put her mind at ease. But pride held her back. She'd done the work right. She'd followed every regulation, exceeded every requirement. She wouldn't give Karen the satisfaction of thinking she'd rattled her. The next morning, Sarah was awakened by the sound of a truck. Rumbling down Maple Street, she stumbled to the window, pushing aside the curtains just in time to see a white city vehicle pulling into her driveway. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she watched a man in a hard hat emerge from the truck, clipboard in hand. He was tall and broad-shouldered with the confident stride of someone who knew exactly what he was looking for. Sarah threw on clothes and rushed outside, her bare feet slapping against the cool morning concrete. "Good morning," she called out, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. "Can I help you?" The inspector turned, and Sarah found herself looking in two kind brown eyes set in a face that seemed vaguely familiar. Sarah stared at her phone, certain she'd misheard. "Danny, What do you mean you just inspected my pool? I mean, I'm sitting in a city truck outside your house right now, and I just spent the last hour looking at your absolutely perfect pool installation while your psycho neighbor watched from her window like some kind of suburban spy. Danny's voice carried a mixture of amusement and irritation. Small world, huh? 'Cause Sarah's legs gave out, and she sank onto her patio steps. You're Inspector Davidson, Daniel Davidson, yeah? I go by my middle name at work. Started doing it in college, and it just stuck. She could hear the smile in his voice. Mom always said you were the smart one in the family, but apparently neither of us connected the dots until now. Oh my God! Sarah pressed her free hand to her forehead, trying to process this revelation. Danny, I had no idea. When you offered to look at the pool last week, I was offering as your cousin, who happens to know building codes. Today I was here as a city inspector, responding to a complaint. Two very different things. His tone grew more serious. Sarah, we need to talk. Are you free this evening? Yes, of course. But Danny, everything was okay with the inspection, right? I mean, as the official inspector, not as my cousin. Everything was perfect. Better than perfect, actually. You exceeded code requirements in ways that most contractors don't even think about. Danny paused, but that's not what we need to discuss. It's about who filed the complaint and how she did it. 3 hours later, Danny sat at Sarah's kitchen table, still wearing his work uniform, but with his official demeanor, replaced by the easy familiarity of family. He'd brought Chinese takeout and a manila folder that he placed carefully beside his plate. Okay, Sarah said, settling into the chair across from him. Tell me everything. Danny opened the folder, revealing several official forms and printouts. Karen Whitmore has filed 6 complaints with the city in the past 18 months. 6. That's more than most. Neighborhoods see in 5 years. Sarah leaned forward, studying the papers. Mike mentioned she'd reported other neighbors, but 6 complaints. Tree height violations against the Johnsons and Founded, noise complaints against the Petersons and Founded, property line disputes with Mrs. Garrett technically valid, but maliciously motivated. She got Mrs. Chen cited for having too many cars in her driveway, which was complete bullshit because it was Christmas and her family was visiting. Jesus, Sarah shook her head. What's wrong with her? That's not the worst part. Danny pulled out another sheet. Look at this complaint she filed about your pool. Sarah read the form, her anger building with each line. She claims I'm using substandard materials, that the pool poses an imminent danger to neighborhood children. Danny, she's never even seen the work up close. Keep reading. Sarah's voice rose as she continued. Unlicensed electrical work. I hired a licensed electrician. Improper drainage causing flooding. What? Flooding? Failure to obtain proper permits? I have all my permits. She slammed the paper down. This is completely fabricated. Every single allegation. Danny's expression was grim. She filed this complaint 3 days ago, which means she wrote it before I even showed up to inspect. She was so confident she'd find violations that she pre-wrote her justifications. Can she do that? Just lie on official city documents? Technically, no. Filing false reports is a misdemeanor. But practically speaking, most inspectors don't have time to investigate whether complaints are made in good faith. We just respond and do our jobs. Danny met her eyes. But here's where it gets interesting. Karen made one very big mistake. Sarah waited, sensing the shift in Danny's tone. She claims in her complaint that she's observed dangerous conditions from her property line, but Sarah, her kitchen window doesn't have a clear view of your pool area. I checked. The angle is all wrong, and there's a section of fence that blocks most of the site domains. So either she's lying about what she observed, or she trespassed on your property to get a better look. Danny leaned back in his chair. Either way, it raises questions about the validity of her complaint. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. You think she was in my backyard? I think Karen Whitmore is a woman who's used to getting her way, and she assumed this would be just another easy victory. Danny's expression hardened. What she doesn't realize is that she just messed with the wrong family. What do you mean? Danny smiled, and for a moment he looked exactly like the mischievous kid Sarah remembered from family reunions. Well, technically, my inspection found no violations. That's going in my official report. But Karen doesn't know that yet. Doesn't know what? She doesn't know the results of the inspection. Standard procedure is that I file my report, and if there are violations, the property owner gets a formal notice within 5 business days. If there are no violations, ... double quotes, he shrugged. No notice required. Sarah was beginning to understand, so she's waiting to hear about all the violations she's sure you found. Exactly. And she has no idea that Inspector Davidson and your cousin Danny are the same person. His grin widened. In fact, she has no idea that you have any connection to the city's building department at all. Danny, what are you thinking? I'm thinking that Karen Whitmore has been terrorizing this neighborhood for too long, and it's time someone gave her a taste of her own medicine. Danny pulled out his phone and showed Sarah a series of photos. These are from today's inspection. Your pool area, your permits, your safety installations, all officially documented as exceeding code requirements. Okay, now look at these. He swiped to a new set of photos. These are from Karen's backyard, taken from your property line. Sarah studied the images, noting several features of Karen's immaculate outdoor space. What am I looking at? See that decorative fence along her back boundary? It's 6 inches, higher than city code allows, and that garden shed. It's 3 feet closer to the property line than regulations permit. Oh, and my personal favorite, that elaborate outdoor kitchen setup. I guarantee she doesn't have permits for the gas line modifications. Sarah's eyes widened. Are you saying I'm saying that while Karen was so busy trying to find problems with your property, she never bothered to make sure her own was in compliance? Danny's voice carried deep satisfaction. And as a concerned city inspector who noticed these potential violations while conducting a routine inspection next door, I have an obligation to investigate. Danny, you can't. I can't file a complaint based on personal grudges, but I can file a report based on observed potential code violations. His expression grew serious. Sarah, what Karen did to you was harassment, plain and simple. She tried to use the city as her personal weapon to make your life miserable. That's not just wrong, it's abuse of the system. Sarah stared at the photos, her mind racing. Part of her was thrilled at the idea of Karen getting a taste of her own medicine. But another part worried about the ethics of revenge, even justified revenge. What happens if you file a report on her violations? Same process she put you through. Inspector comes out, probably me, since it's my territory, examines the potential violations, and either issues citations or clears the property. Danny shrugged, of course. Karen's violations are actually real, so she'd be looking at fines and mandatory corrections. How much in fines? Height violations, probably $500. Unpermitted structures, anywhere from $800 to $2,000, depending on the scope. Gas line modifications without permits. Danny whistled low. That's serious. Could be $3,000 to $5,000. Plus, she'd have to hire a licensed contractor to bring everything up to code. Sarah felt a flutter of vindictive pleasure, followed immediately by guilt. Danny, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I don't want to sink to her level. You're not sinking to her level. You're holding her accountable for hers. Danny's voice grew passionate. Sarah, this woman has been bullying your neighbors for months. Mrs. Garrett spent her grocery money on fence repairs because of Karen's complaints. The Petersons' kids can't play in their own backyard without Karen calling in noise violations. She's been using the city as her personal attack dog, and it stops now. Before Sarah could respond, her doorbell rang. Both cousins froze. Expecting anyone? Danny asked quietly. Sarah shook her head, moving to the front window. Her blood ran cold when she saw who was standing on her porch. It's Karen. Danny was beside her in an instant, peering through the gap in the curtains. Karen stood on the porch in a pristine white sundress, holding what appeared to be a covered dish, her face arranged in an expression of neighborly concern. She's bringing food, Sarah whispered. That's unexpected. That's strategy, Danny corrected grimly. She wants to get inside. See if you've gotten any violation notices yet. When people are anxious about inspections, they usually can't help talking about it. The doorbell rang again, longer this time. What do I do? Danny's eyes gleamed with sudden inspiration. Answer it. Be normal. Don't mention the inspection unless she brings it up first. He moved toward the back door. And whatever you do, don't let on that you know Inspector Davidson personally. Where are you going? To get a better look at those code violations in her backyard. If she's over here playing the concerned neighbor, she won't notice someone taking official photos of her unpermitted Karen Whitmore hadn't slept in 3 days. Her usually immaculate appearance showed the strained dark circles under her eyes. Her platinum blonde hair pulled back in an unflattering ponytail. Her manicured nails bitten down to the quick. She sat surrounded by printouts, city ordinances, and legal documents scattered across her dining room table like the remnants of a battle plan gone wrong. The anonymous complaint she'd filed should have been foolproof. She'd researched every possible violation, documented every potential safety hazard she could imagine. Sarah Martinez's amateur construction work should have been cited 6 ways from Sunday. The pool should have been condemned, the property declared unsafe, the uppity new neighbor put firmly in her place. Instead, Inspector Davidson had found nothing wrong. Worse than nothing, he'd actually complimented the work. Karen's laptop screen glowed in the pre-dawn darkness as she typed another email to the city manager. Her 15th in the past 72 hours. This time, she was demanding a second inspection by a different inspector, claiming bias and incompetence on Davidson's part. There has to be something, she muttered, refreshing her email for the 12th time in the past hour. Still no response. From any city department, nobody's that lucky. Her phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. HOA board meeting 7 p.m., Whitmore residence. A slow smile spread across Karen's face. She was the treasurer of the Maple Street Homeowners Association, a position she'd maneuvered herself into specifically for moments like this. If the city wouldn't handle Sarah Martinez, perhaps it was time to mobilize the neighborhood itself. By 7 o'clock that evening, Karen had transformed her living room into a command center. Charts and graphs covered her coffee table, showing property values, safety statistics, and liability concerns. She'd prepared a PowerPoint presentation titled, "Protecting Our Community, the Hidden Dangers in Our Backyards." The other board members trickled in. Bob Peterson, a retired accountant, who lived 2 doors down. Janet Chen, a real estate agent who'd been with the HOA since its inception. And Margaret Flores, the neighborhood's self-appointed social coordinator. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Karen began, her voice carrying the authoritative tone that had served her well in corporate boardrooms before her early retirement. "We have a serious situation that requires immediate attention." Bob settled into his chair with a grunt. "Karen, if this is about the Martinez woman's pool again, it's about the safety and liability exposure of every resident on this street," Karen interrupted sharply. "And yes, it concerns Mrs. Martinez's unpermitted construction project." Janet frowned. "Didn't the city inspector already clear her pool?" Karen's smile was razor-thin. "One inspector, one inspection. And frankly, I have serious concerns about the thoroughness of that review." She clicked to her first slide, showing a dramatic photo of a pool accident she'd found online. Pool-related injuries send over 5,000 children to emergency rooms every year. Margaret shifted uncomfortably. "Karen, that's terrible, but Sarah's pool has safety fencing, and inadequate safety fencing," Karen corrected. "I've done extensive research on current safety standards, and what she's installed barely meets minimum requirements. For a neighborhood with so many children, shouldn't we expect better than barely adequate?" The room fell silent. Karen could see the doubt creeping into their faces, exactly as she'd planned. "Furthermore," she continued, advancing to the next slide, "there are serious questions about the quality of the construction itself. This was not professional work. It was a DIY project by someone with no construction experience, no professional oversight, and frankly, no regard for the safety of others." Bob leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing, Karen?" "I'm proposing that the HOA exercise its right to ensure community safety. We send Mrs. Martinez a formal letter requiring her to obtain an independent safety assessment by a qualified pool contractor. At her own expense, of course." "We can do that?" Margaret asked. "Section 4.2 of our covenants allows the board to require safety assessments when there are reasonable concerns about hazardous conditions," Karen replied smoothly. She'd spent hours researching the legal language. "If she refuses, we can place a lien on the property." Janet looked troubled. "Karen, that seems excessive. The city inspector found no violations." "The city inspector spent 30 minutes on the property," A comprehensive safety assessment would take hours and involve multiple specialists. Karen's voice grew more passionate. Are we really willing to gamble with children's lives because we're afraid of hurting one woman's feelings? The manipulation was subtle but effective. Karen watched as doubt and fear replaced the board members' initial resistance. These were good people, parents and grandparents, who genuinely cared about community safety. She was simply helping them see the bigger picture. "I'll need a formal vote," Karen said, pulling out the official meeting minutes book. "All in favor of requiring Mrs. Martinez to obtain an independent pool safety assessment?" The hands went up slowly, reluctantly, but they went up. Karen's smile was triumphant as she recorded the unanimous decision. "Excellent. I'll draft the letter tonight and have it delivered tomorrow." What Karen didn't know was that Janet Chen's husband Mike had been standing in their kitchen, listening through the open window that faced Karen's living room. And what she really didn't know was that Mike was already reaching for his phone, too. "Call Sarah." Sarah was in her backyard, skimming leaves from the pool's surface in the dying light, when her phone rang. "Sarah, it's Mike from across the street. You need to know what just happened at the HOA meeting." As Mike explained the board's decision, Sarah felt her hard-won peace crumbling. They can really do that. "Force me to get another inspection?" "Technically, yes. But Sarah, I want you to know that most of us on the street think this is complete bullshit." Karen railroaded the board with fear tactics and manipulated statistics. "What kind of assessment are they requiring?" "Independent safety evaluation by a qualified pool contractor," Mike read from his notes, "at your expense, and if you refuse, they can put a lien on your house." Sarah closed her eyes, calculating costs she couldn't afford. A comprehensive safety assessment could easily cost $1,500 or more. Money she didn't have for an evaluation she shouldn't need to satisfy a neighbor who wouldn't be satisfied no matter what the results showed. "There's more," Mike continued grimly. "Karen's planning to circulate a petition asking the city to require all pools in the neighborhood to undergo annual safety inspections. She's positioning herself as some kind of child safety crusader." After hanging up, Sarah stood in her backyard, staring at the pool that had brought her so much joy and now seemed to be destroying her life. She was about to call Danny when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hope you're enjoying your last few days of peace. The whole neighborhood will know what kind of dangerous person you really are. This is just the beginning." This time, Sarah didn't hesitate. She immediately forwarded the message to Danny, along with a detailed summary of the HOA meeting. Danny's response came within minutes. "I'm coming over," and Sarah packed the harassment messages Karen's been sending, all of them. "It's time to end this." An hour later, Danny sat at Sarah's kitchen table, his expression darker than she'd ever seen it. He'd brought his laptop and several official-looking folders. "Show me everything," he said. Sarah produced her phone, scrolling through the increasingly hostile messages Karen had been sending from different numbers over the past 3 days. The texts had escalated from vague threats to explicit promises of neighborhood harassment and social ostracism. "Jesus Christ," Danny muttered, photographing each message with his official camera. "She's documenting her own harassment campaign." "Danny, what is she doing?" "This has gone way beyond a simple neighbor dispute. What she's doing is called stalking and harassment. And what she did at that HOA meeting, that's defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress." Danny's fingers flew over his laptop keyboard. "But here's what she doesn't know while. She was playing neighborhood politician tonight. I was filing my official report on the code violations I observed at her property." Sarah leaned forward. "What does that mean?" "It means that tomorrow morning, Karen Whitmore is going to receive a very official notice that she has 14 days to correct multiple code violations on her property or face escalating fines." Danny turned his laptop screen toward Sarah, showing a formal violation notice. "Unpermitted fence height modification. Unpermitted structure placement. $1,200 fine, plus relocation costs. And my personal favorite ton permitted gas line modifications, $3,500 fine, plus mandatory professional remediation." Sarah's eyes widened. $5,000 in fines, plus correction costs, which will easily be another $8,000 to $10,000. Danny's smile was cold. "And unlike your pool situation, these violations are real, documented, and photographed with official city equipment. But Danny, won't she know you're targeting her because of me? She suspects it, but she can't prove it. These are legitimate violations that I observed during a routine inspection. The timing is just unfortunate for her. Danny closed his laptop. Besides, Sarah, this woman has been abusing the city complaint. Karen Whitmore stood at her kitchen window at 6:47 a.m., coffee mug trembling in her hands as she watched the white city truck pull into her driveway. This wasn't supposed to happen. The truck was supposed to be at Sarah's house, delivering violation notices and condemnation orders. Not here, never here. Inspector Davidson emerged from the vehicle with the same methodical confidence she'd observed 3 days earlier. But this time his clipboard was meant for her. This time she was the target. The doorbell's chime echoed through her pristine house like a death knell. Mrs. Whitmore. Danny's voice carried official authority as Karen opened the door, her face a mask of forced composure. I'm Inspector Davidson with the city's Building and Safety Department. I need to discuss some code violations I've identified on your property. Karen's mouth went dry. I'm sorry, there must be some mistake. I haven't made any modifications to my property recently. These violations don't concern recent modifications, ma'am. Danny consulted his clipboard with professional detachment. They involve existing structures that don't comply with current city ordinances. May I come in? I, of course. Karen stepped aside, her mind racing. How had he found violations on her property? She'd been meticulous about following every rule, every regulation. Her house was perfect, her yard immaculate, her compliance absolute. Danny settled into her living room, the same space where she'd manipulated the HOA board just 12 hours earlier. The irony wasn't lost on him as he spread official documents across her coffee table, covering the charts and graphs she'd used. To attack Sarah, let's start with the fence along your rear property line, Danny began, producing a photograph. Current height is 78 inches. City code allows a maximum of 72 inches for residential boundary fencing. Karen stared at the photo, her heart hammering. That fence has been there for over a year. No one's ever said anything about height violations. Code enforcement is complaint-driven, Mrs. Whitmore. When violations come to our attention, we're obligated to investigate. Danny's tone remained neutral, but his eyes held a hint of steel. The violation was observed during a routine inspection of the adjacent property. The Martinez property, Karen said flatly. That's correct. Danny moved to the next photo. This structure here, your garden shed, it's currently positioned 18 inches from the property line. Minimum setback requirement is 5 feet. The blood drained from Karen's face, but I had it professionally installed. The contractor assured me it was properly positioned. Do you have permits for the installation? Karen's silence was answer enough. I see. Danny made a note on his clipboard. And finally, we have the outdoor kitchen installation. He produced a series of photos showing Karen's elaborate patio setup. The gas line modifications here were done without proper permits. This is a serious safety violation. Whitmore. Safety violation. Karen's voice cracked, but it was done by a licensed contractor. A licensed contractor should have pulled proper permits for gas line work. The fact that they didn't suggests either incompetence or deliberate corner cutting. Danny's expression grew stern. Gas line violations can result in forced disconnection until proper permits are obtained and inspections completed. Karen sank into her chair, the weight of the situation crushing down on her. What does this mean? Danny consulted his clipboard again. Height violation, $500 fine plus correction costs. Unpermitted structure placement, $1,200 fine plus relocation costs. Gas line violations, $3,500 fine plus mandatory professional remediation and reinspection, $5,000, Karen whispered. Plus correction costs, which will likely range from $8,000 to $12,000. Danny began gathering his papers. You have 14 days to begin remediation. Failure to comply will result in additional fines of $50 per day. Violation. This is impossible. I can't afford, Mrs. Whitmore. These are legitimate code violations that pose safety and property line issues. The city takes such matters very seriously. Danny stood, his official demeanor complete. You'll receive formal notice by certified mail within 24 hours. Have a good day." Karen remained frozen in her chair long after the inspector left, staring at the coffee table where his photographs had painted a picture of her perfect world crumbling. 5,000 in fines, 12,000 in corrections, money she didn't have for violations she didn't understand. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Having a tough morning, Karen? Welcome to the neighborhood." Rage flooded through her like molten steel. Sarah, somehow this was Sarah's fault. The timing was too convenient, the violations too convenient. Sarah had connections, influence, ways of manipulating the system that Karen was only beginning to understand. But Karen Whitmore hadn't built her corporate career and her perfect suburban life by accepting defeat. If Sarah wanted to play dirty, Karen would show her what dirty really looked like. 20 minutes later, Karen stood in her backyard, adjusting the wireless camera she'd hidden on the fence post the night before. The device was nearly invisible, positioned to capture everything that happened in Sarah's pool area. If Sarah was getting special treatment from city inspectors, Karen would document every safety violation, every suspicious activity, every moment of evidence that would prove corruption and conspiracy. Her phone chimed with a notification from the camera's app, Motion Detected. Karen opened the feed to see Sarah walking across her backyard in a bathrobe, coffee mug in hand, completely unaware she was being watched. Karen smiled for the first time that morning. Information was power, and she was about to gather more information about Sarah Martinez than anyone had a right to know. What Karen didn't realize was that Danny had returned to his truck at the end of the street and was currently reviewing his own surveillance footage from the night, before a crystal-clear video of Karen trespassing on Sarah's property and installing unauthorized surveillance equipment. Sarah's phone rang as she stood by her pool, enjoying the morning peace. "Sarah, it's Danny. We need to talk. Are you free this morning?" "Of course. How did it go with Karen?" "Better than I hoped. She's looking at $17,000 in fines and corrections." Danny's voice carried grim satisfaction. "But that's not why I'm calling. Last night, Karen installed a surveillance camera on your property without your permission." "That's multiple felonies, Sarah." Sarah nearly dropped her coffee. "She did what?" "Hidden camera attached to your fence post aimed directly at your pool area. I have video evidence of her installing it." Danny's tone grew serious. "Sarah, this has crossed the line from harassment into criminal stalking and invasion of privacy. We need to involve the police." "Where is it? Can you see it?" "Back corner, near where you saw her looking around last night." "Don't approach it. We need to preserve it as evidence." Sarah felt violated in a way she'd never experienced. The thought of Karen watching her every move, recording her private moments in her own backyard, made her skin crawl. "Danny, what kind of person does something like this? The kind who's about to discover that crossing certain lines comes with serious consequences." Danny's voice hardened. "I'm calling Detective Morrison right now. She specializes in stalking cases and between the harassment messages, the false complaints, and now the illegal surveillance. Karen's looking at multiple felony charges. Installation of surveillance equipment without consent, invasion of privacy, stalking, harassment, filing false official reports. Karen's built quite the criminal resume." Danny paused. "Sarah, I need you to stay inside and away from windows until the police arrive. If Karen's monitoring your property, I don't want her to know we've discovered her camera." An hour later, Detective Lisa Morrison stood in Sarah's living room reviewing the evidence Danny had compiled. She was a woman, in her 40s, with sharp eyes and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd seen every form of human predatory behavior. "This is one of the most comprehensive harassment campaigns I've seen," Morrison said, scrolling through the text messages on Sarah's phone. "The escalation pattern is textbook stalker behavior and the surveillance equipment." She shook her head. "That's a felony in this state." "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "First, we preserve the evidence. My tech team will document and remove the camera without alerting the subject. Then we'll compile everything into a comprehensive case file." Morrison's expression grew stern. "Mrs. Martinez, what you've experienced goes far beyond a neighbor. Dispute this is criminal behavior that could have escalated into something much more dangerous." Danny leaned forward. "What about the false complaints she filed? The manipulation of the HOA board? Filing false official reports is a misdemeanor. The HOA manipulation is harder to prosecute, but it establishes pattern of behavior. Morrison closed her notebook. Between the stalking, harassment, surveillance violations, and false reports, Mrs. Whitmore is looking at significant jail time. Jail time? Sarah felt a flutter of concern, despite everything Karen had put her through. First offense, probably probation and community service. But with this level of obsessive behavior, the judge will likely issue a restraining order and mandate psychological evaluation. Morrison stood. I'll have officers posted